Hi there, and welcome to episode 72 of B2B SaaS Marketing Snacks. I'm Brian Graff, and I'm here with Stijn as usual, but I'm also here with Fadi George, Kalungi's other co-founder, CTO, and RevOps mastermind. Fadi has a deep background in marketing, has owned his own agency before starting Kalungi with Stijn, and has implemented Hubspot so many times that he's created an app to automate the process for B2B SaaS companies. Today, we discuss CRMs and why so many fall short of their potential in supporting revenue generation and retention. We also talk through what makes great CRMs great and how you can align your team with the right systems and culture to keep your data clean, insights actionable, and make sure your CRMs support marketing, sales, customer success, the executive team, and more. I hope this episode helps you to build your CRM the right way so that it can effectively facilitate your company's revenue machine and unlock its full potential. Let's get into it. Thank you both for being with us again. Today we have Stijn Hendricks, as just about always, and we have a new guest, Fadi George. He is the CTO of Kalungi and one of the original co-founders as well. He has been instrumental in building out our marketing automation and RevOps function, among other things at Kalungi. And we thought it'd be a really good idea to bring him on to talk about the importance of CRMs and really dive into some of the nitty-gritty of why you need them, what you need them for, what you need to build in them to make them successful, and maybe what you need to look to avoid when building out a CRM. So welcome, Fadi.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe we can just give a little bit of a background on yourself and how your history with HubSpot is our CRM of choice, but your history with HubSpot and other CRMs, and then we can get into some questions.
Sure. So as far as my background goes, my education was in business and information management. So I've always looked at business from a technical standpoint and how the technology can impact business performance and investments. I come from an agency background, so I had my own agency, started as a web developer, and then made my way into the various different marketing functions. So got into SEO and paid media and marketing automation. Of course, was in B2B, then B2C, and then I found my way into SaaS in circa 2009. And I've been hooked ever since. We've got all sorts of really great results for customers, but to cut it short, I moved to the US, worked with a couple of SaaS companies that I met Stijn in one of those. And after a successful acquisition of the most recent company, Stijn and I co-founded Kalungi, and here we are. As far as the CRM goes and my background, I've always worked with homegrown systems and Salesforce historically. And then in about 2013, I got my hands onto HubSpot, and I've never looked back since then. So essentially what it was before with CRMs was just, you're looking at managing customer information, tracking sales at a very basic level, and then just basic reporting. And now you've got a system that's fully integrated into every business aspect. So you're looking at source tracking and attribution, email marketing as part of it. Your business process automation is set up within that. You've got cross-object reporting between contacts, companies, deals, and tickets. Lead scoring is part of it, cross-departmental collaboration. So it's much more complete, and it gives much more visibility than what it was used to be used for, which is essentially a glorified database.
Yeah, to your point, right? And you've seen quite a few iterations of HubSpot and many other CRMs, right? But I feel like the CRM as a tool has gone from a glorified database, but basically something that sales can track leads on, right? And customers on, to the center point of a business almost from a revenue standpoint. And it touches marketing, it touches sales, it touches CRMs. It should be integrated with the product. It should show revenue, have really detailed revenue reporting. For a modern day B2B SaaS, I would say you really can't live without a good CRM, right? And we've seen a lot of companies who have done it well, and we've seen a lot of companies who have not done it well. And so I feel like it can be kind of a make or break moment for a company, right? To set it up well or not. So talk to me about, maybe we can start with the good side, right? What does a good CRM implementation look like? What does it have, and what does it accomplish for a business?
So at a fundamental level, if you would say, if it does one thing well, what is it supposed to do? It's to be a source of truth. And what that allows you to do basically is be able to ask any question about any department at any point and be able to get an answer basically within the time it takes to open that report. So at the very highest level, that's essentially what you want the system to do, which means, of course, like a good setup means having the reports that actually answer those questions. I know, Stijn, historically, you've talked about examples where people answer questions with explanations instead of numbers. And so having a really good setup with really good infrastructure then allows you to do that. And so having dashboards that allow you to do that, to answer that question, is going to be key. The foundation of that, clean data, is extremely important. Having really solid integrations. And so when you're thinking about marketing, sales, customer success, and product, which we can talk about in a little bit, having all that information in one place and being able to, again, answer the question at any stage of the customer journey, what channels, for example, are generating the most volume? What channels are generating our largest deals, our fastest closing deals? Which sales reps have the highest close rates? What's the average time to close? Being able to answer all those questions, whether it's a sales question or marketing, is foundational to a great CRM.
How much you're talking about one source of truth, which I totally agree with, right? And it's almost easy to say and hard to do, right? The complexity that goes into building a single source of truth is really high. When we say single source of truth, what we really mean is like trust in the system, right? When we show, or when you show a report on the number of MQLs that were delivered last week, people have to believe what MQL is, that the number is right. There's no fake data being thrown in or anything like that. So how much of that do you think is the implementation of the CRM, of building the workflows and setting it up the right way, versus also managing the CRM the right way, or the culture around the CRM of data cleanliness? What do you think the give and take is there, and how do you look at that?
I would say almost, not to throw a number at it, but at a basic level, you could say 50-50. It's just as much the team's buy-in and the alignment as well as the actual setup itself. So from a technical capability, you can bring someone in who's technically brilliant and can set your system up. But if the sales team isn't going to use it the way it's supposed to be used, if marketing isn't set up or setting up campaigns the way they're supposed to be set up or named, like all that data then feeds back into you being able to answer those questions. So having clear stages of the buyer journey defined and what it means to enter that stage and when that happens and what interactions. From a technical standpoint, managing that is important, but then the teams need to be able to align and say, what do we agree is the actual MQL definition? $1 million question. Where a lot of companies can't answer that very basic question. And so team alignment is just as important as the setup itself. And then I think also just from a process standpoint, ownership of the system, which teams owns which portion, setting up the right permissions to ensure people have the right access levels, but then just people know what do I update and what do I not update? What do we rely on automations for? And then what do we actually have to manage ourselves?
Is there anything that you've done in the past to make sure that once the system is implemented, that on an ongoing basis, the sales team is using the CRM the right way and the data remains accurate, basically?
Yeah, so for those things, it's going to be a lot of just putting in different processes in place within the team. So, for example, if you have a very large team, a lot of different lead assignment rules, you're going to need to have the RevOps team to speak with the sales team about plans for new hires coming up so that they can be included. If it's like lead assignment rules, setting up calendars for them, emails, so on and so forth. So it's really dependent by team, but having processes in place where it's either a bi-weekly cadence, a monthly cadence where you meet and you check in. So that's one piece of it. And then the other piece is setting up almost like a data hygiene dashboard. So for example, every deal must have a contact and a company associated. So doing the reverse lookup of that, which is making a report that has deals that don't have contacts or don't have companies, and making that like your zero dashboard. Basically, it's supposed to be clean. So if somebody checks in on that every day, every week to ensure that report is always zeroed off, that's a nice hygiene item. And then whether it's contact without owners, companies without owners, so on and so forth.
And to your point, ownership of the different pieces of the CRM is really critical too, right? Like we can't have, I feel like it's easy for companies that don't put this in place to have the RevOps team just be like, well, the sales team didn't put the data in correctly. And the sales team to be like, well, this is the RevOps job, right? Aren't they the data guys? And so having that, ironing that out early, right? Not only the life cycle stages and the deal stages and definitions and everything like that, but also who owns what and who's responsible for what, I think is really critical.
Yeah, and a small tip there is usually those things happen in conversations. Document. Just create a document and make it official. And then it's clear. So when you have new hires coming in who weren't involved in the conversation, at least they have that as a place to reference.
I will be the first to admit how quickly information leaves my brain after having a conversation. So it is very good to document and just make sure that everyone's on the same page, right? So what would you say, I guess, flip the coin for me, and what would you say are some of the things that people who are listening should look out for in their CRM to signal that like things maybe are not built the right way, or they don't have the right processes, or it's not performing the way that it should?
So the same goes to the reverse. So if you're able to answer those questions, go and ask the question. You, founder, owner of a business, go ahead and ask your team, how many MQLs came in this quarter? What's the best source for our highest closing deals in our pipeline? And what you'll find is if that thread isn't connected all the way through from the beginning to the end of the customer journey, then that's where gaps will be very glaring. And to the point about the importance of having data, it's absolutely critical to track that because the cost to advertise is more expensive than it was before. And so making those investment decisions just on a whim or just gauging the direction the wind is blowing is not great. So go in and ask those questions and then think of any questions that you, again, as a founder or even a marketing leader or an executive, what's the board going to ask you? What questions would the board ask you about high-level directional things that the organization's going in? What's working, what's not working? Being able to answer those questions, ask your team those same questions. And if you can't get an answer with a report, or if your answer is generally a description instead of a number or a direct answer, then you have problems.
And it shouldn't, to your point, it shouldn't be something where it's, okay, let me work on this and get back to you, right? This should be readily available, right? This information should be live. Yeah, I think what you're saying, especially from an executive level, is right on. I think another area that I've found has been either really exceptionally useful or severely lacking in CRMs that I've worked with in the past has been, well, actually, let me take a step back. I feel like we've been focusing a lot on the truth portion of one source of truth, right? But what you're talking about is the executive reporting side, which is critical. But also what I've seen in CRMs that have worked really well is connectivity between marketing straight to sales, straight to CS, where you can follow a contact, a company, a deal all the way through each department, right? And there's no drops in the handoffs between, right? The customer success person should be able to see exactly what the person clicked on, pages they visited, how they got down the funnel, what sales conversations were had, et cetera, right? To give full context on the deal so that the company doesn't have to deal with any kind of embarrassing gaps in information as they're dealing with the customer, right? And making that customer interaction as smooth as possible.
Exactly. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here is when you're talking in specifically a B2B buying journey where maybe a sales department is involved, you're selling to a company instead of an individual, even though you're working the individual to close the deal.
Right.
The systems like Hubspot or whatever system you use don't have default setups for that. And so somebody has to go and be intentional in building that out. And so even from a source tracking standpoint, and you kind of hear all sorts of perspectives on source conversations, what is the company's source? What is the deal source? Is it the contact who was first created in the system or the contact that was first attached to the deal? So all those rules have to be so clear in order to connect that thread. And again, coming back to the setup, yes, it has to be executed, but the teams have got to be aligned on that so that when we're telling that you're confident in what that data actually represents.
We don't need to go fully down this rabbit hole, but do you have a preference on source attribution and like first touch versus last touch? I feel like whenever I get asked that question, I always say, well, as long as it's consistent, right? we should look at all of it, but we need to be consistent throughout.
I'll give you a quick answer that will leave a lot of people either very happy or very frustrated. I won't say it depends, but what we like to do is kind of track the main conversion points. So when you're looking at first touch, how did a contact enter the system? Oftentimes, if a company is heavily sales-led or if they're bringing a lot of contacts into the system, it'll heavily weigh in that direction. But then the key point that you need to measure is when somebody becomes an MQL, at least per our definition of it, as in when somebody raises the hand, shows the intent for a sales conversation. Mm-hmm. What was that conversion point? And so the systems don't have a way to capture that. You have to kind of capture that snapshot when it happens. But that key point is very, very important because, again, if the team's doing a lot of imports, it's going to skew your data in one direction. So having kind of the creation point, the original source, and then a conversion source, something where like when somebody raises the hand for sale, what was that campaign? What was that source? Is oftentimes a really good signal. When you're looking at like last touch before close, those are more like further down the funnel. Yeah. From a marketing perspective, those 2 points would be good baselines to start with.
Yeah, I agree. So let's say the scenario that you just described in the not so good CRM exists, right? And you find yourself in it, which happens to many companies. What do you do? How do you get out of there? It's a really messy situation, right? That has a lot of stakeholders. It has a lot of intricate problems, right? Like what's the path forward?
Good question. So when we talked about what does it take to get the system into good order, yeah, there's technical setup, there's data cleanup that needs to happen. But the key is like getting the team alignment. So that actually needs to happen first. That conversation needs to happen first about if that is identified, we're in a mess, it's a complete cluster. In some cases, it may not even be that, let's say your system started that way. You might have just gone through a merger or an acquisition. Mm-hmm. And now it's 3 different systems with 3 different processes and teams and different products being sold that you have to consolidate. So getting those teams aligned, meeting and getting aligned on those things. And again, having the conversation, getting those definitions down in agreement, and then starting to build that out. That's a key foundational point in doing that because it impacts if you're a single company yourself or if you're part of a larger acquisition where oftentimes these things are needed.
Yeah, it's a great point, especially with messy CRMs. I think that the temptation is just, okay, let's just fix the data, right? And then we'll reorient and figure things out. But to your point, right, if you go that direction, you just kind of end up on a treadmill that goes to nowhere, right? Because the data will always be unclean and you'll always have to fix it. It ends up just being a big time waster and adding just a ton of frustration and lack of faith, honestly, in the system. So it is really good to take that time up front.
Agree. And I think one key point here as well is just like when you think of anything that you're building, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, right? If there's a playbook for a B2B SaaS setup for your particular system, go and get that playbook, go and consult that company, go and get them, bring an expert to go and do that because they've done it thousands of times before. Building a website, you can start from a blank sheet of paper or you can use a template and be up and running in like 60 days, 30 days. Mm-hmm. So being smart about that and using playbooks is going to be key as well. Leverage expertise, it'll pay dividends for sure.
You've talked about in the past this growth feedback loop in a CRM and why it's so critical and why we set up CRMs that way. Would you mind kind of reintroducing the topic and why you think it's so critical for B2B SaaS companies?
Sure. So there's 2 main points. One is specifically around the view of the funnel versus the flywheel, which HubSpot's done a really good job of marketing. So knowing that delighting customers drives further demand, and knowing that basically every single unicorn company grew through referrals, through word of mouth. There's not one exemption of a unicorn company that did not grow through word of mouth or referrals. It always happens that way. And so getting to that point is important. So thinking of your customer journey as customers enter the system, there's marketing, original source attribution based on campaigns, there's ad spend, what's happening further down the funnel through your pipeline, sales, getting that sales feedback to marketing is important because marketing might be generating more demand, but it might be lower quality. So feedback loop number one from marketing to sales, then customer success back to sales once the customer closes, expectation setting on the sales front to make sure that they can delight that customer from beginning to hopefully ongoing continuation.
Right.
But then oftentimes there's a piece that's missing, which is the feedback loop from customer success back up to marketing.
Yeah.
And the only way that could work, of course, again, coming back to the connected thread, is if that source data is connected all the way through so that marketing can look and say, okay, having a system where we can track customer success and tie that back to what our initial efforts were or which personas we worked. Is our go-to-market strategy validated? Should we be going after the executives, or is it the managers that we need to be going after, or the users? Who are our advocates in the system? So having that connected thread to feedback to marketing so they can go and double down on those efforts is extremely important. So that's the growth feedback loop, is ensuring that across departments that's being fed through, and across every handoff, feedback is given to the previous department.
Yeah.
And then the second piece, which we touched on a little bit, which is integrating product. The product teams have their own metrics to determine product success. And of course, engineering has things like uptime and technical metrics. But especially for companies that are product-led, when you can't go and address by user to get feedback, oftentimes that product team is going to determine what, let's say, a successful trial looks like. Or in the freemium model, to get someone to subscribe, how many contacts signed up, how many people subscribed. To have that data in your system, and again, the connected thread to see the source of those companies, is extremely important. So ensuring that the product team is part of that growth feedback loop is how you're actually going to accomplish that, along with the three main service departments where people are involved.
Yeah, I mean, what you're touching on with this is something that Stijn likes to talk a lot about, but really like the growth levers of a B2B SaaS company, right? You have retaining customers and you have upselling customers, right? And at the heart of that is a solidly functioning CRM, right? That can pass information, to your point, between all the departments. I think also just more generally, what the CRM that you're describing, right, allows is a company that has a unified go-to-market, right? That doesn't have sales and CS and product and marketing all operating in silos and going in different directions, right? The only way that a company doesn't create the seemingly good but really bad scenario of frantically filling in a leaky bucket with new demand that immediately exits is by having all these three departments speak the same language, go off the same data, and regularly communicate. So I couldn't agree more. Stijn, you have any questions for Fadi on any of this?
The first time, by the way, I got introduced to CRM in 1993. It's kind of, you guys weren't even born probably, but it's called ACT, A-C-T, with an exclamation mark. It wasn't even called CRM system. I don't know what they called it. Not CRM, because Tom Siebel, who introduced Siebel to the world, the ex-Oracle guy, that's really who coined CRM. And by the way, when I started at Microsoft, we were implementing Siebel. I got a nice North Face ski jacket as an incentive to get all my contact and customer information into the Microsoft Siebel implementation. That was in the late 90s. But in the early 90s, I was using ACT. We're not using it, I was actually implementing it for a small software company where I was helping with some of the software work. Anyway, I digress. But Fadi, so we have this interesting aspect in a CRM system that there are multiple objects of interest. There's the account, the customers, there are contacts, there are things that happen to those customers in those accounts, things like opportunities and leads, etc. Tell me a little bit more about the complexity of dealing with all those different objects as they kind of go through the different funnels. Because I always see a lot of challenges where marketing is more done to people, contacts, and then our sales is really working on opportunities that are often a combination of contact and customers. And then accounting is usually more worried about the customers who owe money, an invoice that needs to get paid. talk a little bit about how those things, best practices, there, challenges.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And actually, it directly leads to something that's often seen as an assumption on the reporting side when you think of like cohort reports, let's say in B2B selling. And so what we see oftentimes is people are tracking the contacts all the way through. Which people came through? Okay, they're now in the lifecycle stage opportunity and they're now customer. And so from a reporting standpoint, it's often limited. From an ownership standpoint, it's not clear who owns what. We know sales owns opportunities, but the key here is to recognize contacts. Like you have to communicate with the contacts regardless of where they are, whether there's a deal associated or not. And specifically in B2B and B2B SaaS, you're oftentimes selling to new logos. The metric is about how many new logos did we get, or logo churn, and then revenue, same thing, like revenue coming in or new deals. And so one thing that I think people often miss is this cross-object reporting, where you're at the top of the funnel, you're measuring how many people came in. In your pipeline, you're counting associated deals to those contacts. And then once you close the new logos, how many of those new deals are actually companies? So we find, for example, companies who sell a SaaS solution often sell onboarding. That might be two deals tracked in very different ways. Your SaaS revenue deal might be a total contract size and a term. It's a 12-month contract for whatever, $10,000. But your onboarding might be $5,000. That's a one-off. So being able to break out those deal types and report on that revenue in a different way is key. But then also recognizing those two deals only represent one new logo. So from an acquisition standpoint and efforts, your marketing is targeting bringing new logos in. And so like being able to build the system out to recognize your different deal types and structures is key. And then just on the company type, when you think of like trying to build a good marketing infrastructure and building out referrals, is ideally you're recognizing company types, because some of those companies might be partners. If you're selling to companies that have child companies, ensuring that parent-child relationships are put in place. So those are some things that we often see as well, like a company who's selling to franchises. There's specific locations that are customers and some that aren't. And so setting up the system to be able to track those is going to be key as well.
With that, particularly with, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But also, I think one of the things that I've run into with reporting like that is that on a week-to-week basis, it makes a lot of sense. But then when you want to zoom out and look at conversions down the funnel, you kind of have to do that extra reporting legwork on the back end, right? Because marketing, for instance, would want to keep their metrics the same across, right? Or sales, right? Like you don't want 5 MQLs to go into one opportunity, right? You need to normalize the denominator almost of those. It's an interesting piece of legwork that you need to put in place to make sure that conversion rate data is actually accurate instead of just trying to switch units all the way down the funnel. It can be tough.
The other challenge, of course, the timing of events. Right. If you start thinking about what is something move through the funnel, also in the time dimension, how long does it take for things to convert, and which conversion goes with what conversion earlier in the funnel, that makes it even trickier. I have one other question. When there's business, there's accounting, Fadi. And so CRM is basically, I love the term, by the way. It has two of the most important things where the business has to care about: customers and relationships with their customers, right? And then, of course, you're trying to manage those. That's CRM, customer relationship management. And it happens throughout the whole business. So the sales CRM and the marketing CRM are just two of the CRM systems that a company has. They often have many more. People don't realize, but if you have a customer service organization, you mentioned Fadi and technical support, but the accounting team also has a CRM system. There are records that help you send an invoice to the right person at the right time, to the right address. There might be other parts of the company, the organization, that have their own versions of CRM system. HRM system where you maybe stay in touch with people who work at your company or have worked at your company. It's also a version of a CRM because those people might also be clients in some form. And so the other thing that I was wondering you could maybe talk a little bit about, if you have multiple CRMs that often come from multiple vendors, how do you kind of keep all that stuff in sync? How do you make sure that when an email address is updated somewhere, a client sends a change of address notification like we moved? And then, of course, they don't like it when that gets updated only by the salespeople, but not maybe by the accounting department, and they get the invoice at the wrong address. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you're getting into a really good conversation, which is, do you house all of this in one, or do you go best of breed, which is what we're talking about? There's different systems, and there's ones that do
best of breed. Is there any CRM that is accounting and sales and marketing and HRM and?
Well, HubSpot's pretty good at it. HubSpot's pretty good at it.
Would you be the only one that covered all of it? Or
yeah. On the HR side, yeah, not so much. But I think that you're going more into like larger scale, like NetSuite, Oracle.
I'm not saying you should get one of those systems. They're too large, and they're almost too large to implement into. But yeah, it's hard. I don't think there are many that are small that are covering all those different things. Right? Maybe Sugar does, or one of those other Zoho, one of those suites.
Yeah, I haven't dug personally too much into those systems. At least for our customer base and where we see a lot of need for that, especially like between HR and finance, I think finance is the more relevant one that we see most often. So in order to do not just ARR reporting based on deals, but actually true customer lifetime and customer lifetime value, what does that look like truly from let's say connecting QuickBooks and getting all the spend data into the system? That's oftentimes where we see like maybe the contract is tracked in the system, but not the transactions. And so, yeah, like using best of breed, like HubSpot is our personal favorite, but yeah, there's larger solutions, but then you're going further up market, approaching some of your world, Stijn, in the ERP space, yes, going really up there.
The amount of customization that's required for a lot of those CRMs to be effective is that you can make a sale. Obviously, you can make a Salesforce an amazing CRM, right? But the amount of expertise and manpower and customization and add-ons basically that you need to put in place to make it that way can be prohibitive for a lot of the companies that we work with. But for some, it works, right? For large companies, I can see it working quite well.
Can we talk about the famous quote from one of our team members, to never uneat the fish? And we've talked about this in previous podcast episodes, Brian, but I think you can't talk about CRM and not talk about this. Mm-hmm. Big challenge, I think, for people who are new to using a CRM just to get their hands on it. So let me kind of introduce the topic and the challenge, and then Fadi, you can talk a little bit about ways to solve for it or to manage this challenge.
Sure.
When you follow the journey, the adventure, if you will, of a contact or a deal or an opportunity through a CRM sort of funnel, they go through different stages. And usually those stages are defined by things that happen that cannot unhappen. They have happened. Like if someone is in a sales funnel and they get a demo, that demo will never be undone. The product will never be unseen. If a contact got an email and they clicked on the email, they cannot unclick on the email. That happened. So a lot of these things, when you set up your CRM system and you track what happens to a contact, what happens to a deal or an opportunity, they are a one-way street from a data sort of purity perspective. And it also means that when you do reporting, you set up all the dashboards in HubSpot, Fadi, it means you can very cleanly state that certain things move through the funnel in a way that you can display as, for example, a conversion rate. How many of these things converted from one stage to the funnel to the next? The reason you can do that is because it's a one-way street. There will always be more people that did not see the demo than the people that see the demo. And so that's very, people get that, they understand that. But now the following happens. You're following a contact through the funnel, and the contact gets a certain score, in marketing, we would give it a lead score, for example, and it's based on all kinds of attributes, things that happened to that contact or things that contact did. They clicked on certain pieces of content, engaged, interacted with certain things, showed up for a meeting, or all those things. And they lead us to give this contact a certain status that, again, goes through that journey that you cannot really reverse. So it's a one-way street. But of course, the score can actually change up and down. Because when a contact, for whatever reason, becomes less engaged with your content, maybe now the score needs to go down. And for lead scoring, that's actually not that complicated. You can talk about that a little bit, Fadi. But one of the challenges that I often see with pipelines is that when a sales representative needs to think about their opportunity in the form of a forecast, like what is the likelihood of this opportunity to close or deal in HubSpot, that when they've done the demo and maybe they created a proposal, so now this opportunity has a certain stage in the funnel, and often that is tied to a certain likelihood for that opportunity to be won, because historically all the opportunities that made it to this stage in the funnel have this likelihood to be closed. So that's how you then do your forecasting and reporting. But now the following happens. This opportunity is still pretty good, but the decision maker, the technical decision maker or the economical decision maker who you showed the demo to leaves the company. They're no longer your contact person. They're no longer your champion. So now you think, oh, this opportunity that had a likelihood of 37% of closing, because that's what all these opportunities that had a demo get. It doesn't necessarily look like it's 37% anymore, because the person who I gave the demo to actually left. And now you want to reduce the percentage. How do you do that, Fadi?
That's a really deep and great question. So,
because people do move things back in the funnel, which they shouldn't do.
Yeah, and I think to start with the point of somebody progresses through and they meet milestones that you've defined based on specific definitions. We talked about having clear life cycle stages. What are the criteria to enter each of those? Once someone's met that, that's it. They're in that life cycle stage. And I think oftentimes what people don't recognize, or maybe don't know yet how to distinguish, is the difference between a life cycle stage and a lead status. And so during that customer journey, someone will be engaged or not engaged. If you've got things like MedPick introduced in your sales process, tracking against those things, do I have my decision maker? Yes or no? If that changes, that should maybe update your score in order to take some of that probability out. But those are things that happen through that journey, and those things should be tracked through either lead statuses or deal statuses, or, for example, we see like oftentimes product-led companies, they come in and they have trial signups. So if there's a trial signup that's engaged, they're meeting the milestones and really active, and a trial signup that never logs in. And so they both met the criteria to start the trial, and it counts as one, but if they never activated. So tracking those through statuses rather than specific pipeline stages or specific lifecycle stages. So distinguishing between those two as like stages in the journey versus in that stage what's currently happening is going to be key in that. And so again, more lead status versus lifecycle stage, or if it's deal stage versus the information that you have on the deal, could be ways that you can do either increasing or decreasing lead scores, prioritizing, doing probability calculations and things like that.
But isn't the lead status connected to a contact where the deal is connected to a deal?
Correct. Yeah, and again, depending on the stage of the journey. So let's say on a contact level, you're tracking that at the contact earlier in the funnel. But once it's on a deal, you can have deal statuses. And so saying this deal is in this stage, or if it's deal information, thinking of, again, the example of like MedPick, what information do we have, and does that increase or decrease the probability of that?
Great idea. I love if you can have in your CRM some custom fields that give you MedPick scoring, go up and down. You can say, I don't have the economic buyer anymore. But then, Fadi, you would calculate the probability of a win by combining the deal stage and the metric score or something like that.
Yep. And it depends on how much weight you want to apply to those things. If, for example, you have, I know in our pipeline, let's say we have a requirement to have, let's say, the decision maker in order to enter the proposal stage. If that person leaves, then you need to go back to say, we need to do the whole goal setting call again and align before we even go back to the proposal. So maybe that deal has to go back a stage, and that decreases the probability because of the stage that
You can't go back. You cannot really to fit.
Actually, on this note, I was just thinking about this, right? I think that the med pick and the deal scoring is absolutely the right way to do it. One of the things that we put in play, implement a CRM that is simple, but often not thought about, is making deal stages hyper specific. They either happened or they didn't. Like the way that we build a demo deal stage is demo attended, right? It's not demo, right? And so it either happened or it didn't, right? There's no ambiguity in that definition, right? If I would say, I would probably lean with Stijn on this one. If a deal needs to go back, then it probably needs to go to close loss and you need to make a new deal, right? That's the only way that this works. I'm sure that other people do it differently. But I also wanted to bring up, and feel free to bring me back if I'm taking us off track, the theory of uneat the fish versus the practice, right? One of the ways that it gets messy is when a salesperson says, well, yeah, the deal stage changed, or the stakes have changed in this deal, so I need to go back. Another way is that I'm a marketer, so I'm biased. Say sales updates the MQL definition, or says that, hey, good for you, you've generated a bunch of demand, but the quality is too low, so we need to be more stringent with our criteria. And of course, as marketers, you should do that, and it's always a balance between marketing and sales to deliver the right number of the right quality leads and marketing qualified leads. But then what do you do about reporting, right? There's a point in time where reports used to be something, and then they're something else. And I've transparently had difficulty with CEOs and salespeople to justify marketing's improvement, which it has been an improvement of delivering less but higher quality leads, right? They'll always point back to, well, before you came in, I generated 500 leads, and I'm looking at those. Those were all trash, right? So it doesn't actually matter. But it has been hard to communicate that between sales leaders and CEOs. So anyways, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, that is the reality of a lot of what marketers and sales have to deal with in these conversations. And so because Stijn touched on that a little bit on what do you do when that change happens? Draw a line of when that change happens, and don't go and update things that we agreed to before that have happened and we've set those. Right. Because usually those things that you're tracking of its status or whatever are ongoing things. They're activity type things to Stijn's point. Like, what did the contact do? And so oftentimes to go and mess with historical data might mess things up quite a bit. So just drawing a hard line and realizing at this point, we're going to see a decrease, but let's ensure to follow that report through the funnel of like how much is translating into pipeline and how much of that pipeline is actually closing, which comes back to like department alignment. Are we on the same page? Is sales giving that feedback to the growth feedback loop? If they're good quality, just ensuring all those things happen. But yeah, it's to draw a clear line and then know that after this point, the data is going to change, and then you just report on that going forward.
And make sure you get alignment from all the teams that, hey, this day going forward, we are expecting less, right? But that's a good thing because we are being more stringent in our criteria. I like that. Any last minute questions from you, Stijn?
Maybe a couple last comments. You could probably turn this into multiple episodes. CRM is really the plumbing for a modern business, for a commercial company. When the napkin to track everything that you want to know about a client gets too small, you need a CRM system. And like when the first CRM arguably was created by a guy named James Farley, who was Franklin Roosevelt's campaign manager for the DNC, who started to keep track of the people that they wanted to help politically, to get support from in a not a database yet, but some form of a Rolodex that was very much like a modern CRM when you think of the purpose and how they used it. And that's really what it still is today. It's in the end, it's the only place where you can track everything that you need to know about your client, which is the core or the business needs to grow and to survive. And if you don't spend enough time doing this well, you will spend so much time fixing data quality issues, people guessing versus knowing, recreating information, making decisions based on bad or incomplete data. So yeah, it's a very important part of every business to get right and to not cut corners. So that's the last thing I wanted to kind of just share on that. Yeah, it's not optional too for people to use it, right? Once you have it in place, like salespeople think that it's kind of, they should be rewarded or complimented if they get their CRM up to date. No, that's what you get paid to do. Just like showing up on time and checking your email.
I feel like a lot of the times people or companies treat the CRM kind of like a nice to have or almost like a back office tool or something like that, but it's not, right? It should be as connected to revenue in their minds, right? Because it is the plumbing and the support machine that really makes revenue work. And so you can't skimp on it, and you really do have to invest the time and resources to make it successful. But yeah, to your point, I think we could do a whole series on CRM. So maybe that's what we do.
The other thing from my perspective is oftentimes you're tracking leads and pipeline, and there's numbers that show up in your board reports and on performance sheets. They're metrics of company improvement. Setting up a good CRM and the efficiency that comes from that, the visibility to get that data, to be able to make real-time decisions based on data-driven insights. There's no ROI report for that. And so the investment needs to be recognized. It's worthwhile for you to be able to do that. You might not see it on any ROI sheet. It will show in the long term as you get more visibility, so you can hold your teams accountable and be able to make those data-driven decisions.
100%. Okay, let's call it there.
Thank you so much, Fadi, for this conversation. I think it was really good.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Stijn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Adriano Valerio for producing this episode and the Kalungi team for helping us make this whole thing work. And of course, you for choosing to spend your time with us. As a reminder, all the links we mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. And if you want to submit or vote on a question you'd like us to answer, you can do that at kalungi.com/podcast. Every time we record, we take one of the top 3 topics and jam on it. Thanks again.